All right, so I need you guys to work with me as we do the first class. It's going to be a little rough, but this one is for the public. All right, I'm just trying to make sure I get the Patreon side together. Give me a second. Now, I got to assume that everybody has their book for book. Everybody has book one. I have to assume everybody has book one. So these first couple of classes will be on YouTube. Maybe not the first couple. Maybe it might just be this class right here. Right? It's cool because I got to get the hang of this. This is going to be different than what we do in our normal YouTube settings, to make sure that we really get the full gist of the communication in the book. So we're going to try to get through as much as we can. Yeah, definitely. What I want, like I said, is for people to start taking their assessments. And then from there, start to we're going to create an army of authors. So this morning I was working on the grade levels, right? So we can have different grade levels and organize what it is that we're doing. And then eventually we will have some folks that'll be able to once you get past a certain amount of assessments, I'll make you an editor on the YouTube page, then a manager on the YouTube page, and then you'll be able to go live on the page and do your content as if this was your page. Right. So there's a we have a whole plan with this. I'm just waiting for the thumbs up from our technician behind the scenes that we are good on the Patreon side. Right, and then we can jump right into book 1. Now, okay, beautiful. All right, so we live on the Patreon side. All right, cool. Like I said, I'm assuming that everybody has book 1. I'm assuming that everybody has book 1 because this is still the book that we have sold the most copies of. All right, this is still the book that we sold the most copies of. Still the blueprint to pretty much everything that we do. So I have to assume that we all have our copies of this. Some of us may have given ours away, right? If you did that, you need to get that book back or get you a new one, right? Now, my lighting is the best we could get it. Trust me, this is 2 days worth of playing around with different lights and lighting positions and all kinds of crazy stuff. So anyway, I have one goal in this book, which is to simply introduce you to my unified theory of health and fitness. Main problem with modern health systems, blah, 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 blah. In this book series, you will read things that will surely blow your mind, like the real reason jump rope is the most effective form of cardio. Piezoelectricity. Jumping rope creates a beat of time pulses from the skeleton of electricity that feeds the fascia system throughout the body. It's so much in this first book, right? So it took us, I guess, maybe 30, no. Yeah, I want to say 29 or 30 books later before we actually wrote a book dedicated to fascia. But most of the later books are us expounding on a lot of what's already laid out in this book. Hold on, let me get a happier hat on. This hat is not happy enough. All right, here we go. Yeah, see, I'm a hat person. I'm a hat person. You know what I'm saying? So if I'm around the house working or I'm typing, I still have on, my Scully, my work gear. I'm in electrician mode. I'm in engineer mode. If I'm on the live, I need a little bit more, energy. Right. All right. And yes, you could get this hat from the website. Right. Jump rope, piezoelectricity. Jumping rope creates a beat of time pulses from the skeleton of electricity that feed the fascia system throughout the body. Oddly enough, I came to this conclusion studying jujitsu and proprioception, which led me to the finding that electricity in the human body is converted into a digital language which the various pigments use to communicate that are repackaged as what we recognize as cytokines. So we got some work already right in there. Right, so we're going to start with piezoelectricity. Right, we're going to start with piezoelectricity. Anybody in the chat, do you have a working definition of piezoelectricity? Yeah, this is participation, right? Participation, piezoelectricity. And we're going to go to proprioception. Now, I can't see both screens. When we cut YouTube out and we're just in the Patreon, then I'll be able to see both places. So right now, I'm only able to see your participation on YouTube. So don't worry about it. I'll add our working definition for piezoelectricity. Piezoelectricity is electricity created by mechanical stress on a crystal lattice structure. Man, I didn't even know I had that in me. Piezoelectricity is electricity created by mechanical stress on a crystal lattice structure, right? And hopefully our lighting, because it looks like that last area here is disappearing a little bit. No. All right, we're gonna have to go with how we had it. We're gonna have to use a combination of senses. How about that? In fact, that brings us to proprioception. That brings us to proprioception. What do we got? What do we got for proprioception? See, this is why it's important for us to get this lingo down. And eventually we're going to get into that body language book, because the lingo is everything. And I realize that a lot of times, you know, in America, the average person has a 4th or 5th grade reading level. a lot of what we discuss on this platform is beyond the 4th or 5th grade reading level, which means that a lot of what we're discussing is going over the audience's head, right? So it's important that we slow it all the way down and break down some of the terminology and then go back over the concepts. And for that, it's going to take time. It's not going to be, even in the 3, 4, 8-hour YouTube videos, it's still not the same as this. This is going to be drastically different, right? So this is why I said we're going to be able to go in much more depth with the understanding, right? But proprioception, this is how your body senses movement, action, and location. Proprioception is how your body is able to sense what's going on. Movement, action, and location. Movement, action, and location. Now, like I said, I learned this concept. I mean, I knew the word. I knew that we had a bunch of mechanoreceptors in the body, right? But it's not common conversation. It's not something that you're going to hear from no holistic YouTubers trying to sell you no herbs. So it's not a word or a term that floats around. It's not really used a lot. The only place that this word I found to be used a lot was in, the higher belts. I was going to say higher degrees. The higher belts in, like I said, jujitsu, right? Because jujitsu is if you were to sum up the entire art and practice of jujitsu in one word, it would be proprioception, right? Jujitsu is about playing chess with your body versus another person's body. Or, if the situation, creates itself, you might be 1 versus 2 or 1 versus, you might be getting jumped, right? But it's about chess. It's about sensing the other person's movements, actions, and when it comes to location, I'm going to add a caveat to location. We're going to say balance. We're going to say balance, right? We're going to add a caveat to location, and we're going to put balance. But this is very important in terms of understanding the work of these guys. Pigment. Your pigments. Because remember, everything that you register as a thought, a sense, an instinct, right? All of these things have to somehow be translated via some set of pigments in your body, right? That is a real thing. That is actually a thing. Plug in this adapter real quick. If it wants to participate, there we go. I would definitely say the same thing with martial arts in general, but with jiu-jitsu, because jujitsu is more about close quarters, it's just a lot more intense. It's a lot more intense than necessarily striking from a distance with your hands or your feet, or well, elbows getting the close distance, but striking from the distance with your hands and your feet is going to be a lot. It's not going to be as intense as joint locks, wrestling, submission holds and throws and things like that, especially being designed as a martial arts system for elderly, weak, or just females. Jiu-jitsu was designed to equalize the playing field. So it was designed for women, elderly folks, or small, weaker men. You know what I'm saying? So that's why it's so dangerous should a youthful, strong, and healthy person get their hands on it. Because then it just makes it much more effective, the more vigor and passion you can put into it. But anyway, in this book series, you will read things that will surely blow your mind, like the real reason jump rope is the most effective form of cardio. Piezoelectricity. Jumping rope creates a beat of pulses from the skeleton of electricity that feed the fascia system throughout the body. Oddly enough, I came to this conclusion studying jujitsu and proprioception, which led me to the finding that electricity in the human body is converted into a digital language, which various pigments use to communicate, that are repackaged as what we recognize as cytokines, right? So immediately, what I'm doing here, first page of the book, is I'm connecting cardiovascular health and cardio exercise with electricity, and not just with electricity, but with rhythm. With rhythm, right? With rhythm. When you watch people that know how to jump rope, they keep a pace. Whether they're jumping rope fast, whether they're jumping rope slow, whether they walking a dog, doing tricks, with the rope, etc., etc. There's a rhythm and a pace. Every time you apply mechanical stress on your skeleton, that is creating electricity. Now, how are we going to translate that electricity into something usable for the body, right? Your pigment system. Your pigment system. Your pigment system, we know via the EnQi cycle, is going to work hand in hand with the water, and your water in each cell is structuring itself, obviously, in the cytoplasm and blah, blah, blah. But all throughout the body, you have the fascia, which is the liquid skeleton, right? The fascia is a liquid skeleton, right? It is a liquid skeleton. Now, am I saying your fascia is liquid? No, I am not. But it is a framework so that you don't just have like organs floating in water. That's what your connective tissue is doing. Your connective tissue is a framework to compartmentalize all the areas in the body. And it does that via water and structured charge. Right? So, hopefully we got that. Hopefully we're getting a little bit more we can get a little bit more out of the book this way. Right? Various pigments used to communicate this electricity as a digital language and is repackaged as cytokines. So maybe we need to add cytokines here. All right, so hopefully you got this. We moving though. So you got to get this stuff. If you're writing, if you're taking notes, which you really won't have to take notes per se to have the information, because it's going to be on video and the video will live on Patreon, right? So as long as you're members, paid members of Patreon, you'll have this stuff. But what I would suggest, this is just my personal suggestion, you get a black and white notebook, right? Not a notebook with the spirals. Those where the paper comes out and be all over the place. You lose stuff over time. No. Black and white notebook, old school. And you take notes. Because the more ways you interact with information, the stronger the neural networks you build for that information. So if you just hear the information, that's one way that you're interacting with this information, right? That's cool. If you watch me write it, right? Or you read it from your book, that is another way that you're interacting with it. So you're hearing it and you're seeing it, right? And you're reading it. Writing it adds another dimension to your neural network, your memory storage, and your ability to recall this information, right? Your ability to recall this information, and not only to recall the information, but the genius part of it is your ability to see the patterns. Your ability to see the patterns and then create the patterns, right? And your ability to see patterns and create patterns is your ability to teach. Your ability to see patterns in the information, create patterns in the information, meaning connect things. That is going to be your ability to teach. And that is our goal, right? Our goal is to create teachers. Our goal is to create authors. Our goal is to change the world. That is our goal. A lofty goal. We're not playing for the, we going for the whole, we shooting high, right? We want to change the whole world with this, what we're doing, right? So we can't, mess around, right? All right, cytokines. Cytokines, right? When we say that the electricity is converted into a digital language via various pigments and used to communicate, that are repackaged as what we recognize as cytokines. These cytokines are traveling men. No, I'm just kidding. They're traveling proteins traveling proteins How do I want to communicate this last part? Traveling proteins. I can't necessarily, traveling protein messengers. That's what we're going to do. Traveling protein messengers. We'll do that. Traveling protein messengers. Now, when you get into the newer books, you'll be able to get another level of understanding of some of these things. Like, okay, we know proteins function in the body as transformers or transducers, right? A protein is going to function as a transformer or a transducer. If we're dealing with energy or power, that means a transformer. If we're dealing with information or signals, data, then we're talking about a transducer, right? But that's going to be later on. That's going to be later on, right? For now, we just want to get down the basics, right? Cytokines are the language of the cells. Cytokines are the language of the cells, right? So this right here is what separates me from all the other herbalists. Other herbalists, young aspiring herbalists, what they were trying to learn how to do is figure out secret formulas. They wanted to learn, they wanted to research specific people, right? Whether it's Dr. Sebi or whether it was the guy that lived to be 256 years old in China, or whether there is a guy in Africa who said he had the herbs for this or that or whatever. They would seek out specific people known to have a specific, herbal combination that worked wonders for whatever, and try to replicate that or find out what those herbs were and repackage them. That was never my strategy, because herbs or making money off of herbs was not my first love. It's still not my first love, right? My first love was the chemistry. My first love was just chemistry. You know what I'm saying? How things do things, how things actually work, what's actually going on. How does one cell, talk to another cell? How does, I wanted to know all those little details, and healing was not even in my mind. It just, I wanted to know how things worked. You know what I'm saying? I don't know whether it was being alone so much as a kid, but I can't even attribute it to that, because all of the kids that I knew, we were all kind of in the same boat, but my mind was just wired for PBS. You know what I'm saying? So 3-2-1 contact, like I lived for that every day. Like that was my show. I would watch Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers and all that just because they all came on like in a clip together, back to back to back. But 3-2-1 contact was literally what I was waiting to watch. Like that was it for me. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know where that's just what I was attracted to, for whatever, for better or worse, the science stuff. You know what I'm saying? So cytokines was always a thing for me. That was always a thing. So when I started to get into the herbs, my thing was I wanted to figure out which herbs affected which cytokines, right? Because if I could manipulate the cytokines, then I could manipulate cellular behavior, right? That was my thing. Like, okay, so cytokines, you got hormones. Forget about hormones. I know you got the endocrine system. It makes hormones. The hormones give instructions to cells. That's not really that's not really how the body works. Like, that's a very generalized, basic kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? But in order for billions and trillions of cells to function in harmony, you got to remember, everything has to be working together. All the cells that make up your lungs all have to be in rhythm, in sync, for you to have healthy lungs. All the cells that make up, let's say, your heart, they all have to be in sync for you to have a healthy heart. Now, the fact that the lungs and the heart have to work together means that not only do all the cells in the lungs have to be in sync, but all the cells in the heart have to be in sync with one another. And that goes through all the various systems. So your body is like, when I say your body's built on rhythm, that is definitely an understatement. Your body is built on top of rhythms, on top of rhythms, on top of rhythms. And that's what your heart has to do, is synchronize all of those rhythms. But anyway, cytokines are the language of the cells. So as you get deeper into cytokines, you're going to get into myokines and chemokines, right? But you don't really have to get into those to figure them out, because those are just subcategories of cytokines, right? And what are the cytokines? The cytokines are basically the interleukins. Interleukins and a couple other families of chemicals, but the easy way to remember them is the language of the cells. It's how cells communicate to one another, right? And so most people never heard of cytokines before until COVID, right? When COVID hit, everybody in the world heard of cytokines and everybody was scared of them, right? Because they heard on the news that COVID was causing people to die from a cytokine storm. There's a cytokine storm that's happening inside people's throats or inside people's chests, and it's causing them to die, right? And so that's one of the reasons why it wasn't like a ring the alarm crazy thing when it initially happened for me to communicate to the people that were following and studying with me at the time, because we already like bro, y'all, is everybody taking the 21-day detox every month? Okay, we good. And we were good. Why? Because we're regulating the cytokines, especially the ones that we need to worry about in terms of defense, right? So, you got a bunch of cytokines that have multiple roles, and in some spaces, they're pretty good guys. Some spaces they're bad guys. But then you got IL-1, IL-6, and tumor necrosis factor that are pretty much bad guys whenever they pop up. You know what I'm saying? Like, that is the three ruffians. It's IL-1, IL-6, tumor necrosis factor are always the guys at the center of problematic, And if you do the studies, you go through type 1 diabetes, IL-1, IL-6, tumor necrosis factor are the inflammatory factors that tear up the pancreas, mess up the beta cells, right? So a lot of the treatments, right, outside of just like insulin or whatever the case may be, or metformin or this or that to regulate sugar, but the pancreatic treatments are geared around finding ways to lower IL-1, IL-6, and TNF expression in the pancreas, right? Because the inflammation is what is destroying the beta cells, right? So for me, it was like, all I got to do is find the plants that have the chemical compounds in it that downregulate IL-1, IL-6, TNF. I got this. Light work. I got this. This is light work. This is light work. I got this. Right? But it's cross-disciplinary study, right? Cross-disciplinary study. Because a lot of what we learned about herbs, at least in my, for me personally, a lot of what I learned about herbs came from studying bacteria, came from studying bacteria, right? And that's where a lot of, biblical context and things like that comes into play, because we're talking about a planet full of single cell organisms before complex life. And really, that's the only real distinction between these classes of bacteria and, like complex life. The cells that make up complex life are the ones that, like they got good jobs. They got good jobs and they move to good neighborhoods. Those good neighborhoods is your body. The bacteria cells that's just floating around everywhere, that may, pathogenic, infecting people and all that, those are the cells that are living in poverty. They ain't getting no education. They don't have a trade or a skill. So they just out there looking to rob and steal. But make no mistake, the one thing that a bacteria or a virus would like more than anything is a nice home in a nice neighborhood. Just like, just like somebody that's in the street. They might be, selling drugs, selling their body, doing whatever to get money, but don't get confused. The end goal is a nice house in a nice neighborhood where they can have their babies and they don't have to worry about, what their baby's going to eat, tomorrow or the next day. You know what I'm saying? Life is simple in that way. Certain basics repeat themselves. So when they're creating things to kill bacteria, etc., those things have similar functions in your body, right? This is where later on, after the great discovery of antibiotics, came the discovery of antibiotic resistant bacteria, right? Because now we're learning how the bacteria are able to learn and think and process information and do better next time. But then also we're learning about how our bodies work at the same time, right? So anyway, cytokines, cellular communication, very important. All right, we move it. Let me see what we got over here. Yeah, see, I know you are a geek. Atomic reflection. I know you was in the house doing a bunch of nerdy things. I was in the house doing nerdy things. It just so happened that I was also in the street doing crazy things. So, yeah, I was all over the place. You know what I'm saying? But it's what it is. Right? All right. This conversation of ours is going to move very fast. Blah, blah, blah. Purpose: to establish the link between metabolic illness and eumelanin dominant people. Eumelanin and pheomelanin dominant people are known around the globe to have a 200% higher risk factor for type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's, and dementia as melanin recessive people. To make matters worse, Alzheimer's has a 15 to 40 year incubation period, which complicates the illness. With this in mind, our goal was clear: pinpoint the flaws in our biochemistry and our neurochemistry that serve as the foundation to these problems. Then provide working solutions. Right? So, one term I would like to define before moving on, which totally helped me to unravel this mystery of diabetes. Okay, I can see we only get a few erasers before we need a spray and wash. So we're going to define diabetes as a energy metabolism problem. We're going to define diabetes as an energy metabolism problem, right? That way, all forms of diabetes are addressed, right? That way, all forms of diabetes are addressed, whether it's type 1, juvenile, adult onset, pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes, mitochondrial diabetes, pancreatic diabetes, like whatever it is, it's all going to come down to a problem with energy metabolism, right? Whether it's, you're having high blood sugar levels and high blood insulin levels. So, the popular idea is that you're not getting enough sugar and insulin into the cell, right? But typically, what you also find is people who have high levels of blood sugar and blood insulin, well, their cells are loaded. The cells are loaded, right? So type 2 diabetes, these people folks have, the cells are loaded. So it's not a matter of getting the energy in there. It's a matter of metabolizing or getting the substrate for energy, right? Substrate means a thing that you're going to use to turn into something else, right? So sugar is a substrate for glucose, right? Sugar is not glucose. Glucose is a type of sugar. Glucose is a type of sugar, but sugar is not glucose, right? So we want to make sure that we get that down pat, right? Sugar is not glucose, right? But glucose is a type of sugar. Right? So we need to get these little nuances down packed. We need to get the little nuances down packed. All of these things, trust me, all of these things are important. Because you might be saying to yourself, well, why do I need to study this information if I'm not a diabetic? Maybe I'm a young athlete. Well, your body's ability to metabolize sugar is your strength and your power, right? So this is just information that you need to understand how your body works, regardless to the condition. Again, this is information about how your body works. You still there? Okay, good. Regardless to the condition of your body, right? So glucose is a type of sugar, but sugar is not glucose, right? Sugar is a general term that covers a wide range of sweets, right? Sweets. Sweet is a taste, right? Sweet is a taste. So there are substances that when they hit our taste receptors, there's an electrical signal created and sent to the brain that your brain interprets as sweet because it's accompanied by a release of opioids and dopamine. So literally, a thing is classified as sugar because it gets you high. So we kind of need to know, that sugar gets you high, right? Sugar gets you high for good reason. The way your brain is designed is so that you get high when you do something good, right? So that way you would want to repeat that action. Our free will combined with capitalism has created, some forks in the roads where we've been able to manipulate the basic systems of our brain to do some things that maybe, which is, some alternative things, right? Some alternative things. But that's what sweet is about. Stimulating that that reward center in the brain. Now, bitters, on the other hand, bitters are chemicals that are I'm not going to say toxic to the body, but they stimulate a different type of taste. They make you go, nah, I don't want to do that again. But that is a part of hormetic training in your body. You're when you consume bitters, and as I say it, I need to consume me some bitters, right? But when you consume bitters, it is stress training, right? That's how your body gets better. That's how your body gets younger and stronger. Stress training, right? When you do a push-up or when you lift a dumbbell, it is stressed, voluntary stress that you're putting on your body. As your muscles get stronger, that means you're able to tolerate higher loads of stress, right? So anyway, diabetes, energy, metabolism, problem. Oh, I just put energy metabolism. Okay. Diabetes, energy, metabolism, problem. Right? But the key word is energy. Right? So immediately, if we start to see diabetes as an energy metabolism problem, we can immediately figure out the big mystery, right? Because the mystery for a long time is, why was type 2 diabetes so connected to Black people? There's no diabetes gene. There wasn't a diabetes gene. So they couldn't connect like with breast cancer, right? And the jury's still out with breast cancer, but they can go, okay, well, you have the BRCA1 gene or the BRCA2 gene, so you have an elevated risk, at some point in your life of breast cancer. You might want to think about, a mastectomy or something to that effect, whatever. Anyway, but there was no diabetes, DIA1 or DIA2 gene for diabetes type 2. Is just, loosely associated by looking at the patterns and the statistics. For some reason, Black folks, whether they are fat and sloppy, whether they are skinny, whether they are athletic, nice built, like for some reason, diabetes been stalking them. Type 2 diabetes been stalking them. And so you go, okay, well, in America, Black folks typically do have certain eating patterns that could probably be the cause. But then you look around the globe and you go, there are Black folks with all different types of eating patterns that still have diabetes stalking them down. So we could probably take food off the table. And so that kind of led to the lifestyle exercise approach. Well, obesity is the number one risk factor. So yeah, if you just lose some weight, let's get some exercise more, eat less. That's where that approach came in. But that didn't that didn't move the needle. You know, people that were exercising more, eating less, or even skinny people were still coming down with type 2 diabetes. So then you had the well-rounded approach. Like, well, if we change the diet and we start to exercise more, then we're gonna get to see the numbers moving. And you got the numbers moving, right? You got the numbers moving. Then you came along the herbalist or the naturopathic approach and like, we could probably do better if we started to ingest certain things that boost energy metabolism, right? Or certain things that are able to augment the biochemistry in favor of energy metabolism, right? The same approach as the pharmacists and the pharmaceuticals. The only difference between a pharmacist and his pharmaceuticals and an herbalist and his herbs is that the pharmacist wants to corner the market. The pharmacist wants to corner the market, meaning you can't patent plants. So the pharmacist wants to be able to patent a plant because the pharmacist has no trust in the people to reward them for their financial outlay of making their discoveries. So in order to protect the money they invest in having to search and research to find these plants, and then go further than that, once they found a plant, go through all of the thousands of chemicals in the plant to find out which are the active components in the plant that are able to communicate with the cells to change the cellular behavior pattern. Like, they want some money for that. You know what I'm saying? They want some money for that. And they should get some money for that. So I'm not, knocking the hustle, but that's largely the only difference. So that's why, you hear me or other people say sometimes that 90% of medicines come from plants, because they do. You know what I'm saying? And the action of the medicine versus the action of the herb, well, there's a lot of difference there, but just in the mindset of the pharmacist and the mindset of the herbalist, both of them, with exceptions to the rule, but both of them are looking to help and heal people. Now, do you have herbalists that's just looking to hustle herbs and get money and they don't really care about the people? Absolutely. Do you have pharmacists that's just looking to hustle and get money that don't really care about? Absolutely. But the overall sentiment in either of those professions is to definitely be helping people, right? So, my thing was the overall approach, right? The exercise, the food, the herbs. In some instances, folks may need surgeries or medicines as well. But information, start with the knowledge. Because if you start with the knowledge, you can minimize the need for medicine and surgery by executing on the things that you can control better. So that should you find yourself in need of medicine or surgery, A, you're not going to be over medicated, which causes more complications, and then you need more medicines and surgeries. B, you know how to execute your plan. You can start with a goal and eventually get off of said medicines, or, be out of the way of surgeries. Because a lot of time, once one surgery starts, like my mom's, forget about it. Once my mom had the first surgery, my mom was getting like a surgery, at least one surgery a year. And she was getting a surgery a year. Every 5 minutes, she was going in for a different thing related to something else. Oh, well, no, because see, what happened was, and my eye was bad. And because my eye was bad, I think that was because of the diabetes. And, well, what happened was my lungs, because I wasn't able to breathe good. I'm like, all this is related. This is why the information, you need the knowledge so you can understand how all this is linked together. Anyway, So diabetes, once we understand it's an energy metabolism problem, right? And we understand that energy in the body is translated by the pigment system, we can immediately make the connection. We can immediately make the connection, right? Once we learn, again, diabetes is an energy metabolism problem, and that pigments are responsible for translating energy, immediately we can make a tie and figure out what's going on, right? So it stands to reason, once we figure this part out, that the people that have more dense pigment are probably going to be the people that have more problems metabolizing energy, right? Especially if they're in a situation where there is no dedicated education to how their body works. There's no dedicated system of study or education for how your body works, right? That means you're going to be crippled. If the medicine, the studies, the information, the surgery is everything is predicated on people who are not pigment dense, that means you're going to be in trouble. So we can then extrapolate from that diabetes is a problem with having not lack of nutrition, not lack of exercise, but lack of knowledge of self. Period. Because everybody's body is different. And the crazy thing for me was listening to scientists and doctors say that everybody's body is the same, while also teaching and classifying people with single nucleotide polymorphisms, right? That's a long term. That means that everybody's DNA has different changes in it, and those changes make up the different groups of people around the world, right? And those changes come from diet, environment, things like that. If you have the same diet and lifestyle as people that live in the same place as you do, your DNA is going to have the same type of markers, right? That means you're going to have a similar type of biochemistry. But on the same token, people half a globe away from you, well, their bodies are going to be different. Their body's going to be different. Their metabolism's going to be different. What their body wants to use as a substrate to produce energy is going to be different, right? And so you may have the same parts, but those parts will work differently, right? And if you go to a Toyota mechanic and you have a Mercedes, right? And you try to put those Toyota parts on your Mercedes might not even make it out of the garage. And it's not a matter of expensive, because if you try to put the Mercedes parts on your Toyota or your Honda or your Kia may not work. So it doesn't matter about expensive. You could grab the Ferrari and try to, take the parts off that and put it in your Honda. It's still like, it doesn't go like that. Honda parts need to be in Hondas. Ferrari parts need to be in Ferraris. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just how that goes, right? Even cars in the same cost bracket, you know what I'm saying? They still have their own parts. Now, do they have parts that are interchangeable? Sure. They have some parts that are interchangeable, but there are some parts that this vehicle specifically needs to have that is going to be different. And the more complex the system, the more unique the parts are going to be. And there is no system on earth that is more complex than the human body, period. Especially when you get to the heart and the brain, right? So for me, it's no wonder that the heart and the brain are the number one and number two cause of death. These are the most complex systems, meaning because they're the most complex systems, there's the least amount of understanding about how they work. Which is the reason why science progressed to the point where let's just go ahead and replace this art. Let's replace stuff. Replace a valve, replace a heart. All right, 1 second while I figure out what to unplug this, put this charger. Peace and blessings out there to everybody. My name is Dr. EnQi, the founder of the Melanin versus Diabetes movement and ministry. Our goal is to fight diabetes by creating a biochemically literate society, one book at a time, one person at a time, one household at a time. Join us now by going to Amazon.com and getting all of the books, getting all of the books that you can afford, even if you can't read them all. Share them with family, share them with loved ones. Let's begin the study. And if you need tutoring sessions are available at AmericanHealer.website. I can give you one-on-one tutoring through these books. Let's build a biochemically literate society, one person at a time. Thanks in advance. Got the screen on me. Let me show you how I really got the screen on me. Let me show you how I got the screen on me. Let me show you how I really flex. This is how I really flex. Look at this. You got the screen on me. Let me show you how I really flex. This is all right. Do we have sound? Brings the sound back. Can y'all hear me? Okay, we hear you. All right, good. Hold on. Technical difficulties. Okay, we Gucci. So apparently, my smaller charger does not work on my newer laptop. That is interesting. All right. Anyway, diabetes, energy metabolism, pigment, knowledge of self, different body types, blah, 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 blah. All right. Back to the book. There's a clear link. All right, now this is not, not going to spend a whole bunch of time on this, but I do want to just put this up here just so that this could be in your working memory. This marker stuff is killing me. These guys, triglycerides. Triglycerides. Packets of sugar. I want y'all to think of triglycerides as packets of sugar. Right? We know that we use what? Glycogen. Right? You see that there? So we need to get these overtones. Right? We need to get these overtones, and hopefully the simplifications will help us understand what's going on in the body. So if you increase hydrated carbon, right? AKA carbohydrates, in any shape, form, or fashion, my E and my S be one thing. Right? The graffiti artist in me from the Bronx pops out every so often when doing stuff like this. But if you increase carbohydrates in any shape, form, or fashion, it doesn't matter if it's grapes or cupcakes. If you increase your carbohydrate consumption without increasing your exercise, your oxygen, and your water, your movement, your water, and your air, you run the risk of increasing your triglyceride levels. Point blank, period. Just make it simple on yourself. So don't be one of those people that are focused on exchanging sugars, right? Like you're giving up white rice, you're giving up white bread, you're giving up, white potatoes, and you're incorporating in more, strawberries and mangoes and bananas and syrupy, you're making those smoothies you're putting half a box of dates in the smoothie. agave syrup, maple syrup. You're just exchanging sugars. And a lot of times, the quote unquote healthy sugars are more dangerous than the things that we, than the, Haagen-Dazs ice cream or, Hostess Twinkies or whatever the case may be. Because at least we know that a Twinkie is a Twinkie. We know that a Little Debbie is a Little Debbie. But a lot of times people don't exercise any discipline when they think they're having a quote unquote healthier snack. And a lot of times they don't feel there's a need to walk, run, or exercise to complement what it is that they're consuming. Right? That's what this damn thing is. Blood clot. I downloaded a clean my Mac thing to try to get the computer. Anyway, now it keeps popping up on the screen, messing me up over there. I'm figuring it out though. You got to download them things, use them, and then I guess delete it off the, whatever. Anyway, so hopefully we got this, right? Hopefully we got this. And the packages, maybe this, well, we'll have this as a later conversation anyway, much later when we get to the mitochondria water book and all of that kind of stuff. So I don't have to go too crazy now. Right, and unpackaging. We'll get to those conversations later, right? But the package of your sugar, the package of your substrate, your glucose, right, or your fatty acids, a lot of times determines what kind of effort you need to use to break that down. So that's what type of exercise, what type of lifestyle should accompany a certain type of diet. But then B, what type of thermal effect that food is going to have, meaning how much energy it takes for you to break that food down. Right. But that's more of a calorie conversation, and we'll get to that at some point later on too. Anyway. All right, so we're on page 3 right now, and now we're going to jump into our guy, Max Kleiber. Remember, these classes, only the first, or maybe the first class or the first 2 of these classes is going to be on YouTube. The rest of them will only be on the Patreon. So, on YouTube, I still be breaking down the information, going through the books or whatever, but we won't be doing whiteboard, and we won't be like taking our time going step by step through each book. That is only going to happen on Patreon, right? This is the warm-up. I'm getting used to figuring this out, technical difficulties, lighting difficulties, right? Figuring all this stuff out, my format, and also allowing the audience at large to get an idea of one of the reasons why they should support the Patreon. You want to support the Patreon because you're supporting the movement and the research in general. Forget about what you get out of it. This can't be about you. This has to be about the people, right? So it's not just about what you get out of it. It's about what the people get out of it. So you want to support the platform just so we could keep the research going. Then you got to think, well, what am I personally getting out of this? Damn it. You know, I'm going to pay my 20, 50, 100, 200, 500, 1,000 a month. Nobody's paying 1,000 a month. I wish I had people putting that kind of money up, right? But what you're going to get is the dedicated. Oh, we didn't even talk about, man. Well, I guess I'll talk about that more when we do like our first class private. You know what I'm saying? So I'll probably do one more of these. Maybe tomorrow. Today's Thursday. Yeah, I think I'm gonna do one more of these tomorrow. And I think the schedule is gonna try to like do the weekdays. So I'm gonna try to do 3 to 5 classes a week. 3 to 5 of these classes a week throughout the weekdays. And they'll be in the daytime. So some folks will be at work or whatever, but you'll be able to catch it, you know, whenever, because it'll live on Patreon. But we're gonna have it structured in grades, right? And those will be based on your assessments. So after we get through with a book, we're gonna post the assessment on the website, AmericanHealer.website. You can take your assessment whenever you want. And then once you pass that assessment, you're eligible to take the next one. You can't just jump around and just take, you can, you got to take one, and then the next one, and then the next one, then the next one. And each of those assessments are in essay format. We talked about this yesterday during the Dr. E's video. So go back and watch that video if you haven't seen it, right? But those essays, after you pass a few assessments, we'll be able to put those together and build your first book out of that, right? So my goal is to not just be teaching this information, but to get you at home to start writing books, right? Once you start writing the books, you'll be able to teach the books better, and we will be able to faster. We'll be able to add some speed to how fast we can change the world. Because a book can travel much further than you can. A book can travel much further than you can, right? Some people buy these books in Africa. Some people buy these books in Ireland, in France. And when you have the book in those places, the books get legs because people steal books all the time. You know what I'm saying? That's the beauty of a book. You leave the book out, somebody looks at the cover and goes, what is this? What is this? You know what I'm saying? So at first, if you notice, the covers of the books was kind of, I ain't gonna say basic, but it's more Amazon involved in this. This is more of the Amazon template involved in the cover of these books than me. So, you know, as I continue to write books through Amazon, I learn more and more about the book process as opposed to the information. Y'all know I'm not a stickler for grammar. To me, it's about getting the information out. But the book process in and of itself was a whole headache-filled journey to figure out. You know what I'm saying? I'm still figuring out stuff over there. But the more I do it, the better I get at it, right? And you will too. So your assessments, these classes is definitely an investment in yourself. Even if you're going to be taking these assessments and, you know, building your book and you don't want to sell any books, we still putting your book out, right? In your name on your own Amazon account, not on my name, not on my Amazon account. I'm not making no money or intend on making no money off of anybody's books. So if you put out a book and your book sell a bazillion copies, please go ahead and hit the Cash App. As I will not be getting any money directly off of your books, right? You will be getting that money, then your kids will get it after you're dead, right? So we'll be working on building inheritances of intellectual property for our babies, right? That's what we're working on, building inheritances of intellectual property for our babies. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, there's that, right? But we will definitely have grades, and it'll be organized based on people's assessments. Once I could start reading some essays and seeing where people are at, you know, who's got what grasp of the information and so on and so forth. All right. Oh, where was that? Max Kleiber. Max Kleiber. Am I spelling his name right? Yep. No. Max Kleiber. Right? Max Kleiber is the inventor of Kleiber's Law. This is his intellectual property. Right? Kleiber's Law. Now, here's the thing, right? Because I guess you guys can look up these people on your own. Antoine Lavoisier, Edward Pfluger, Julius Sachs, and Max Rubner. These are names that are in the third paragraph on page 3, right? These are other people that are considered pioneers in the space of biochemistry, right? They're considered pioneers. How we doing on time? Pioneers in the space of biochemistry. So the way my mind works, right? Once I became aware of Max Kleiber, in order to figure out the landscape, the environment, remember, in order for you to learn any language, whether it's a language like Russian, English, Chinese, or whether it's a technical language, you have to be submerged in the environment. So in order for me to fully understand and absorb Max Kleiber, I needed to understand the landscape, the environment, especially the time period that he was doing his research and study, what his contemporaries was doing, right? And then the guys that followed up in the same space, right? You can't really get a good understanding of a scientist, a doctor, or researcher without getting the context for the research, right? So anyway, the flaws, or what I felt to be flaws, right, was the majority, not majority, all of Max Kleiber's work was done on animals, and then he graduated to using himself and his pupils, right? And when he ran his experiments, they were inside a building with no lights. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I noticed that pigment, you melanin dominant, like dark skin, brown and black people were not a part of any of the research that went into these understandings. Now, mind you, everybody from the palest albino to the palest white person, all the way up to the purple, black, super dark, like everybody has pigment. Everybody has pigment cells, right? Period. Everybody has some pigment. You know what I'm saying? It might be a rare case or two where a person is albino on the outside 100% and on the inside 100%. I don't know that that person could survive or be alive. So I don't think that's even possible, right? But everybody has pigment to a greater or lesser extent. But your pigment level is going to play a huge role in your immune system function and your metabolism and your energy production, right? So I looked at what Max Kleiber came with as a foundation. Just as a foundation. Like, okay, that's step one. Step one, Max Kleiber figured it out. All of the energy that your body uses throughout the course of the day does not come from food. Period. It doesn't matter if you're on a vegan diet, an alkaline diet, a paleo diet, a keto diet. It don't matter what you do, what you're eating. Now, different people, different gap. But on average, there's like a 15 to 30% gap in the amount of energy your body's producing from metabolism and sugars and fats and proteins and drinks and waters and, you know, the things that you're consuming versus the output, the expenditure, what you're burning, what you're doing. So if you convert the work back into power, and then the power back into the substrates, back into the calories, there's a missing 15 to 30% that consistently wasn't there. At first, they said he was crazy and all that, you know, the process. First, you crazy, then it's accepted, then you're a genius. So he went through that whole process and he got recognized and got an award or two, and, you know. But outside of that, it just sits there. Nobody did any work to figure that missing energy out. And, you know, until now, with what we're doing specifically, there was no classification for electromagnetic tissue. That is a thing that we exclusively came up with. That is our baby. Right? Science classified tissues in two groups. Tissues that consume a lot of energy and tissues that don't consume a lot of energy. That was that. So along with these studies, I came up with a third type of tissue. Electromagnetic tissue. This is tissue that produces at least as much energy as it consumes. It produces at least as much energy as it consumes. Electromagnetic tissue produces at least as much energy as it consumes. Right? Some of these tissues overproduce energy. And the energy has nothing to do with what we eat. It is coming from that other stuff. It's coming from the other stuff. The stuff that we haven't gotten the education on because of we kind of stuck in the Middle Ages. And this is where my beef with living our life based on books written by dead people comes in. You know what I'm saying? We're running our world by people's laws and formulas and standards that have not lived in this world. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's crazy. You know what I'm saying? So that's another reason why we need more people writing about what they're dealing with today. We need more people writing about what they're dealing with today so that tomorrow is more updated, right? We don't want to pass our children a world where they still have to, they still on Einstein. Einstein is still the, controlling popular thought. That's insane. That's insane. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, we need to be Max Planck, Einstein, Maxwell, Heaviside, all of them guys, they did their thing. But that was over 100 years ago. If them folks was alive, the reason why those guys are special is because they decided not to live off the science of somebody that was dead and start to do their own thing. And they started researching and doing experiments and finding stuff out. Like, oh, wait a minute, we can, let's get rid of this and add in this, let's change the world. And they did it. And everybody got complacent with the changes they made and just started, living vicariously. And it's crazy now. Here it is, 2024, and we're still debating, ether. Does the ether exist? Because Einstein's theory of relativity proved that ether doesn't exist with the Michelson and Morley experiment. You can't go by that. Because in 1905, Einstein was co-signing the Michelson and Morley experiment. And then by 1920, he was saying that the Michelson and Morley experiment was debunked and that the world couldn't exist without ether. After he had stayed in the studio long enough. See, the 1905 Einstein didn't stay in the studio long enough. We were dealing with a young man, a smart young man, but a young man nonetheless. After he got some maturity, after he got some time, he said, I may have made a mistake. I think I made a boo-boo with that. But it had already been too late. The world, had already printed up a bunch of textbooks in that little 15-year period. And at that time period, Germany was running the world. Intellectually, anyway. Germany was running the world. So everything ran from Germany. So most of the science and the math, you notice that the names are German that's associated. Max Planck, Einstein, all these guys was over there. Right. So anyway, we got to do our own thing. Right. So electromagnetic tissue. Oh, what I did want to say is, so the divide where left our textbooks devoid of electricity and magnetism was religion, believing in God versus atheism. Right. So to simplify that whole debate, which has changed over the years. So don't think that the atheist debate of today is the atheist debate of 100 years ago or 500 years ago. But the origins of that debate is simple. Materialists versus spiritualists. Spiritual folks believed in the things that you could not see and touch, controlling the things that you can see and touch. The materialist was pretty much just like, no, if we can't see it and touch it, then it doesn't exist, right? And that's where, you kind of had a wedge in science, because you go, well, hold up, we got a periodic table. We cannot see or touch atoms. So technically the God people just win off rip, period. The things we can't see and touch clearly are making the things that we can see and touch. And that's that. right? So so quietly, electricity, magnetism, and light just kind of got wrote out of the books. Right? So hopefully that makes sense. You have a system of red blood cells, a circulatory system, where we know iron is the key component to making the blood cells, blood cells, but no conversation of magnetism. You have a thing called an electron transport chain, but no conversation of electricity. The electron transport chain works by iron, but again, no conversation of magnetism, right? You have phosphorus being oxidized, but no conversation of light. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that's where we had a definite need to understand this other piece to the puzzle, electromagnetic tissue. Let me see, page 3. Muscle fiber differences. Muscle fiber differences, and we might close it down because I don't want to make these classes too long. So these classes, we're going to probably stick to 2 hours, maybe. I might try 3 hours. 2 hours, maybe 3 hours, but the dust and whatever else this is from this marker stuff is driving me crazy today. So we might not get 3 hours, right? But we're still on page 3, right? So we're on the 4th paragraph, right? The closest studies we could find examine muscle fiber differences in eumelanin recessive and eumelanin dominant people, right? As well as differences in lung size. These studies created more questions than answers, which provided the impetus to study eumelanin dominant and eumelanin recessive individuals in their everyday lives with everyday stress and workloads, right? So in this paragraph, right, we're talking about skeletal muscle, and lung size, right? Skeletal muscle and lung size. So now, if we're examining skeletal muscle and lung size from a diabetes perspective, what is the nexus? What is the point where immediately in your mind you can see there's a relationship between skeletal muscle and lung size? Right? Skeletal muscle and lung size. Because there's a skeletal muscle difference amongst the haplotypes. There's a lung size difference amongst the haplotypes. Right? So what is going to be the nexus if we factor in diabetes, right? Well, we know that O2, oxygen, we know that oxygen, we need to breathe at a rate. We need to breathe at a rate that corresponds to how fast our body is breaking down sugar, right? To get the carbon. So respiration has to equal metabolism or be better. But at the bare minimum, your respiration has to match your metabolism because you're breaking down sugar, or glucose rather, right? Which is chains of carbon, right? Hydrated carbon. So you have, this is what a carbohydrate is. Carbon with an H2O attached to it. And you got a chain of those. You got a chain of those, right? That's a simplification, but just think in your mind that way, right? It helps later when you figure out that mitochondria is recycling water, right? But your skeletal muscle activity has to be powered by this metabolism, right? So this is your glucose, right? This is your glucose that your body's going to break down, hopefully, right? If you're suffering somehow, that means you got an impaired metabolism somewhere in here. But this is where the nexus point is. The skeletal muscle requires that ATP production. That ATP production is going to be dependent on how fast the mitochondria can recycle the ATP. Right? How fast your mitochondria can recycle ATP is going to be largely dependent on how fast you can breathe. Now, where lung size and respiration comes into play, because people with wider noses have smaller lungs. People with wider noses have smaller lungs, right? The wider the nose, the smaller the lungs, right? The wider the nose, the smaller the lungs. Smaller lungs creates more pressure, more volume pressure in the lungs. So smaller lungs creates more volume pressure in the lungs, right? If we look at the lung, now I am not an artist, so we're going to look at the lungs like this, right? Volume pressure is the pressure exerted by the gas inside the lungs on the walls of the lungs, right? And the pressure exerted by the gas, you get the gas face, right? The gas inside the lungs, the pressure that it exerts on the walls determines how fast the gas can escape the lungs, right? So the more pressure the gas puts on the lungs, the faster the gas can escape. And there's only one direction that it can go to escape, which is into the blood vessel. So the wider the nose, the smaller the lungs, so that you could get more oxygen in, right? And the darker the skin, you have more fast twitch muscle, more fast twitch muscle, which means you have a more dense muscle mass. More dense muscle mass, more dense mass. So this is how skeletal muscle is related to lung size. Lung size is going to determine the pressure inside the lungs for the gas to escape. The gas escapes into the blood vessel, oxygenating the blood. The oxygen in turn circulates around the body to the cells so that it can turn this wasted carbon, right? You need to add 2 oxygens to each of these broken down carbons to turn it into what? CO2. So the body can get rid of it. Right? If not, right? So say you in couch potato mode, or you just everyday 9 to 5 in it, and you know life is what it is, and you barely got enough time to spend time with your kids and time with your lady or time with your, your husband or whatever. You're breaking down sugars faster than you can get rid of them. Your body's going to start storing a lot of fat, right? You're going to start to have a little bit of hypoxia. And that little bit of hypoxia is going to lead to a little bit of hypercapnia, right? That's how you're going to go down the road. That's the road to sickness, right? A little bit of fat, a little bit of hypoxia, a little bit of hypercapnia. And when you start getting a little bit of hypercapnia, that is going to increase the tired feeling that you feel in your muscles. That's going to increase the speed at which your body produces lactic acid. The speed that your body produces lactic acid is also determined by this process right here. How fast can you get the oxygen in there to remove the carbon? So the slower this process is of getting oxygen in, the faster the carbon builds up, the faster the lactic acid builds up, and the faster you get that tired signal in your brain. So the difference, say you got 2 guys, same height, weight, muscle size, and all that. They both get down to do, some push-ups. One guy gets tired, he feel like his, when you're doing push-ups and you get tired, people that's watching you can see it because your body start to, you struggling on that last push-up. So guy A, he's struggling after 5 push-ups, Guy B is looking over at guy A and he's laughing because he's at 15, 16, 17. He's, he in the 20s, man. He might get to 30 or 40 before he start to. When your body start doing like that and that's your last push-up, that's because you're not able to get rid of the carbon fast enough, the lactic acid, etc., etc. Right? So as your body stops being as efficient with the muscle, people start to exercise less and less. It becomes more difficult. And we think back to our days when we was kids, when we could just do anything. You know what I'm saying? Hop down, do a zillion push-ups, drink some water and do another zillion push-ups, go outside, chase the girls, just do whatever. It's because our system was more efficient. God takes care of fools and babies. After you know better, you got to do better. God takes care of fools and babies. You know, once you're no longer a fool and you're no longer a baby, now you got to be accountable. And not only do you got to be accountable for learning, right? But then you got to be accountable for teaching after you learn. Each one got to teach one, right? So trust me, after y'all get the information like this, you would never be able to be misled. All right. So what we talking about? Blah blah blah. 8-year study. Blah blah blah. We put everybody on the 40-day fast. All right, I think we might wrap it up. And then I might come back on YouTube just to, talk reckless and crazy. And then we pick up tomorrow because it's going to take time to move through these books. But we're going to keep going through each book one at a time till we complete them, launch our assessments, and get busy with the get busy. Like I said, my goal is 2024 Christmas. I want to have at least 50 books, not that I wrote, that y'all wrote. I want to help people to put out, I want to help at least 50 different people to put out their own books on this information. You know what I'm saying? So with that being said, hit the Cash App, send me a few dollars. Make sure you go join the Patreon so that way you can keep getting this, keep getting these classes if you enjoyed the style like this, right? Where we won't really be having, too much crazy stuff. And, you know how I normally do on YouTube. That's going to stay on YouTube. Over here, we'll be a little bit more serious and focused on the information and information driven, right? Whereas on YouTube, we're going to be going crazy. That's just what we do. Right? All right. Yes, and click the like and the thumbs up and all that. 2 hours best? Yeah, I think the 2 hours is good.
Peace to the family. This is Abdul Ali, candidate for U.S. House District 12 here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Let's just be real, folks. The Democrats have destroyed our major cities. Their policies have made us less safe. They've given us less economic opportunity, and they've provided less educational opportunity.
That's the algorithm. Peace and blessings out there to everybody. My name is Dr. EnQi, the founder of the Melanin versus Diabetes movement and ministry. Our goal is to fight diabetes. Oh, you know what? And don't forget, we got a lot of new books that's out. So catch up. I know y'all falling behind, but try to keep up. Peace and blessings out there to everybody. My name is Dr. EnQi, the founder of the Melanin versus Diabetes movement and ministry. Our goal is to fight diabetes by creating a biochemically literate society. One book at a time, one person at a time, one household at a time.